Have you ever noticed how, the moment you stop explaining yourself, people start showing who they really are? Carl Jung believes silence isn't weakness, it's transformation. When you step back, the noise fades and truth begins to surface. In that stillness, life starts rearranging itself, not through control, but through peace. In a world that constantly demands expression, choosing silence can feel unnatural, even threatening. Yet Carl Jung believed that silence is not the absence of communication, but the presence of awareness. When we stop explaining ourselves, we give space for truth to emerge, about others, and most importantly, about ourselves. When we constantly defend, justify, or over-explain, we unconsciously attempt to control how others perceive us. This behavior often stems from a psychological need to be understood, a deeply human desire rooted in our early emotional development. Jung associated this with the persona, the social mask we wear to gain acceptance. However, the more we invest in maintaining this mask, the further we drift from our authentic self, the self Jung saw as the center of psychological wholeness. Silence, therefore, becomes an act of courage. It's the moment you stop performing for others and start observing. When you stop filling every pause with words, you start noticing who feels uncomfortable in that quiet, and why. People who are used to your constant validation, attention, or emotional labor may react with confusion or even irritation. That's because your silence removes their ability to control the dynamic. Without your explanations, they must confront their own assumptions and insecurities. In Jungian terms, this is the projection mechanism in action. Others project their unresolved emotions onto you, anger, guilt, rejection, and your silence no longer absorbs it. It reflects it back to them. This process can be painful to witness, but it's deeply revealing. You begin to see which relationships were built on mutual understanding, and which survived only because you kept the emotional balance alive with your words. On a deeper level, silence activates introspection. When the outer noise fades, the unconscious mind starts to communicate more clearly. Jung believed that our unconscious constantly seeks to guide us toward individuation, the process of becoming whole. But that inner voice can only be heard when we stop drowning it out with external chatter. Silence allows patterns to surface. You start recognizing how often you spoke to avoid conflict, to please others, or to escape loneliness. Over time, this awareness transforms you. You stop speaking from anxiety and start speaking from clarity. You begin to recognize that not every misunderstanding deserves correction, and not every accusation needs defense. Silence teaches discernment, the ability to separate what truly matters from what merely feeds the ego. In that stillness, something powerful happens. The people who genuinely care about your peace remain, and those who thrived on your noise quietly drift away. The truth becomes self-evident, not because you argued for it, but because silence exposed it. Carl Jung once said, "In each of us, there is another whom we do not know." When you stop speaking long enough to listen, both to yourself and others, that hidden self begins to emerge. And with it, the truth of who you are and who truly stands beside you. Once you stop explaining yourself to the world, something subtle but profound starts happening inside you. Your inner world begins to realign. Carl Jung often said that, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Silence is the bridge that allows this awareness to form. It's how the outer noise fades enough for the inner voice to be heard. In constant interaction with others, we unconsciously pick up emotional fragments, opinions, expectations, and energies that don't belong to us. Over time, these fragments distort our self-image. We start making choices to please others, or to avoid rejection rather than to honor our true nature. But when you consciously choose silence, you remove external interference. Without the need to respond, perform, or defend, you begin to meet yourself without distortion. From a Jungian perspective, This process is part of individuation, the journey of integrating all aspects of the psyche into harmony. Silence creates the psychological space for this integration to occur. You start noticing inner contradictions. The part of you that seeks peace versus the part that craves validation. The self that longs for solitude versus the one that fears loneliness. By observing these inner voices without rushing to silence or justify them, you begin to reconcile them. Modern neuroscience supports this experience. When we enter periods of quiet reflection, the default mode network, DMN, in the brain becomes active, the same network responsible for self-referential thinking, daydreaming, and autobiographical memory. Rather than idly wandering, a silent mind often revisits past experiences and unresolved emotions. This is not regression, it's reorganization. Through silence, the brain naturally processes emotional residue, helping us understand why certain memories or people still affect us. This inner clarity manifests outwardly. You start recognizing how much of your stress was self-created, a result of trying to control outcomes or maintain appearances. Silence teaches surrender, not passivity but acceptance, and understanding that not everything requires your energy. As your inner world becomes organized, your outer world begins to mirror that order. Relationships shift. You gravitate toward people and environments that resonate with your calmer state. When you choose silence, something invisible but powerful begins to shift. Your energy starts returning to you. Carl Jung often emphasized that what you resist persists, meaning that the more you engage with conflict, misunderstanding, or emotional chaos, the more energy you feed it. Silence breaks this cycle, not by avoiding confrontation, but by refusing to invest your life force into what no longer serves your psychological growth. Every interaction you have, a conversation, an argument, even a glance, involves an exchange of psychic energy. Jung referred to this as libido, not just sexual energy, but the total life energy of the psyche. When you spend your days trying to explain yourself, convince others of your worth, or manage how people perceive you, you unconsciously drain this vital energy. You scatter your focus outward, leaving little energy for introspection, creativity, or healing. Silence, however, acts as a form of energetic reclamation. The moment you stop defending your peace, the energy that was once used for emotional survival begins flowing inward. This inward flow recharges your inner world, your clarity, intuition, and sense of self. You start feeling grounded instead of reactive. What once triggered anxiety or anger begins to lose its grip because your attention, your most powerful resource, is no longer feeding it. From a psychological perspective, this is a process of withdrawal and recentering. When you detach from toxic dynamics or overstimulating environments, the nervous system slowly exits fight or flight mode. Studies in psychophysiology show that silence and solitude reduce cortisol, the stress hormone, and restore balance in the parasympathetic nervous system, the body's natural state of rest and healing. In that quiet space, your mind doesn't just calm down, it reorganizes. Thoughts become clearer, emotions stabilize, and your intuition, that subtle inner compass Jung called the voice of the self, becomes audible again. Reclaiming your energy also changes the dynamics around you. When people can no longer control your emotional responses, they lose power over your mental state. This is why silence often unsettles manipulative or attention-dependent individuals. Your detachment exposes the emptiness of their control. On the other hand, those who genuinely respect you begin responding with greater authenticity and respect. Energy attracts energy. The vibration you hold silently communicates more than words ever could. Jung believed that energy is never lost, only transformed. When you stop pouring it into chaos, it doesn't disappear, it reinvests itself in your growth. You begin to create, to think deeply, to connect meaningfully. You start living with intention rather than reaction. That's the point where silence becomes strength, not because it hides your voice, but because it teaches you when and how to use it.